It is okay if she says no.
I need to log out of this computer. Leave meeting.
If she really wants to come on, we can do it again.
Hello. Let me kill off the background music because it's a little ominous, and you are not an ominous soul. How are you doing?
Hi, Pamela. I'm doing great. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I need to turn up the volume on my end. Can the audience here feel okay? These are the questions. Can someone in the audience, can you tell us a little bit about yourself while I get a confirmation on the audio levels?
Sure. Okay, so I'm Phil Metzger, and I'm a planetary scientist at the University of Central Florida. I was with NASA for 30 years and took early retirement, a little bit early, and I'm with the faculty at UCF now.
And I just want to say this is an amazing change from last year, because last year I was in a place of inconsolable grief over losing a grant. You were with your wife fighting through cancer, and it looks like as we go into 2020, things are doing so much better. And congratulations on...
Yeah, it was a tough year, but we got through it. I see you did too, so congratulations.
Yeah. And I just want to say we actually have matching donations this hour for every dollar we get, up to $1,000. So everyone out there watching, if you've been thinking maybe I should donate, but you haven't actually bit the bullet, and there are 73 of you out there right now. So up to $1,000. That's an extra $1,000. So please consider giving. Get on the phone with people you know are in the community and haven't given yet, and say, hey, we see you in the chat every day for Daily Space. But speaking of money, you are someone... I stumbled earlier. I don't know if you saw, I was talking with the audience while arting a very bad star system that's like blowing up in all sorts of ways, inspired by Betelgeuse. And I stumbled to remember exactly what your degree was, because in my head, you're that person who thinks about how we're going to become a spacefaring race beyond just the technological questions, just thinking through the sociology, the economics, and all these other levels. And this interdisciplinary nature to what you do is something I wish I saw more of. And can you describe to the audience how it is that you got to be someone that thinks beyond the simple, ooh, cool, let me create, invent, discover this, to thinking about all these broader implications?
That's a really good question. To be honest, I've never thought about that before. So I will, I'll take a stab at answering it. I think I've always been a bit philosophical in nature. That's just been an interest of mine my entire life. And when I was at NASA, NASA, as you know, is a mission agency. It is chartered to explore, and it's chartered to do specific missions. So I was developing technologies at NASA that would help satisfy those missions. But in the course of developing those technologies, we started to realize we were building the building blocks of an industry off planet that could support moving civilization beyond Earth. The pieces started to look like the beginnings of an off-Earth supply chain. We had robots that were mining, that were extracting oxygen, that were storing the oxygen in a metal hydride, storing the hydrogen actually, and storing and liquefying the oxygen, and then using the fuel cells to drive robots, and then also using the oxygen to fire rockets. And so looking at this collection, and we had solar power collectors to energize the system. And as I was looking at this set of robots working together on this volcano in Hawaii, I started to realize, wow, you know, a few more robots, and then you can do mining, and you can do construction. Also, I was in Hawaii on the top of this volcano, and I was thinking a lot about the Hawaiians who found the island, crossing 2,500 miles of open ocean from the southern Pacific, and how they navigated and found the island by using the clues of the way a mountain behaves out in the middle of the ocean. And I started to realize, wow, we're using the same mountain to cross the ocean of space to go to those islands that are up there. And so it was a really philosophical moment for me. And that got me super excited about the prospects of crossing that ocean and taking civilization to new places. So that was when I started thinking a lot more about it. I started working on how do we solve the economic challenges?
Yeah.
How do you pay for the pieces that we need to put into space? How do we motivate people to pay for it? Is it going to be the government as a public effort? Do we need to have commercial companies lead the way? Can we have crowdsourcing endeavors to pay for this? And how do we put the pieces together to make it happen faster? So I guess that was what brought me into this.
And I want to pause and thank you, Adventure Addict, for the donation during the last segment. I'm having things. I'm having planets stolen from me. And thank you. So that's $10 towards our $1,000 match. Keep giving, people, keep giving. And one of the things that we're all coming to recognize is we have to figure out how to make science more sustainable, because we can no longer rely on federal funds, which is part of why I am here year after year asking people on the internet, basically, if you're out there saying we need more funding for science, we need more funding for science education, well, you have to put your wallet where your mouth is, because the federal budget is getting stretched in all sorts of different directions. And one of the things I've heard folks say is flat is the new increase for funding, because if your budget doesn't get cut, you're looking pretty good. And when you hold a budget flat dollar for dollar year to year, but we see an actual economic inflation, that means that we're comparatively having fewer dollars to spend. And since our infrastructure costs do keep up with inflation, we're actually seeing year-to-year budget decreases as our federal budget dollars stay flat and other costs don't care. And so we do need to find new models, new ways to do exploration. And part of this is we also need to change our entire world in a way, to be thinking and learning more technologically. And you had a beautiful thread a few months ago about why Starlink is so important. And I know there are astronomers globally who are up in arms about Starlink. But if it's fully operational and does what it's intended, it's going to provide internet for the world. And that changes how people are able to learn, how they're able to communicate, how they're able to advance themselves. And unfortunately, as you pointed out, and I'm going to ask you to explain, there's no getting around having to do something like Starlink as an intermediate step. And rather than me babble, I'm going to ask you, can you tell us about the economics and the power needs and everything else that requires this intermediate step?
Sure. So I do want to try to take a nuanced position on this. And of course, you know that on the internet, it's almost impossible to have a nuanced position because, as people say, the internet is a nuanced destroyer. So it's almost impossible. If you stake a position, then people want to push you 100% one way or 100% the other way and won't listen to the nuances. But so I'm going to give it a shot. Okay. So I totally empathize with the problems that mega constellations cause to astronomy and even to the aesthetics of the night sky. You know, I don't want to see a sky that's polluted with lights zipping around while we're trying to enjoy the beauty of nature.
Right.
But to put it in perspective, what we've already done with light pollution is far worse than what we're talking about with with Starlink. You know, most
Yeah.
people in the world, and most people that are living in urban centers, which I think is probably a large fraction of the world's population, have never seen the Milky Way. The first time I got away from a city and saw it, it was staggering. I was so moved by the beauty of the heavens. I had no idea that that was up there, because I've only seen the sky that's masked by all the light scattered from the cities, from the street lights. And here in Orlando, where it's humid, the sky is humid, it's really bad seeing. You just can never see the Milky Way. You just can't see it.
And
so,
you have a special level of light pollution from all the amusement parks and the shows and the fireworks.
Right. And even so, we could do a lot better. Just simple things like putting caps over the street lights so that half the light isn't going the wrong direction. You know, there's simple things we can do to make the sky more visible to the people of this world. I used to love that TV show Firefly, and the song they had was, I think it said, "You can't take the sky from me."
Yeah, that's from Firefly.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we've taken the sky from people already. You know, so I would love to do things that would reverse that, and I would love to do things that would make our planet healthy. The fundamental problem we have, though, is that we've got this growing civilization which is outgrowing the planet. And so we're trying to squeeze too much industry into a finite amount of surface area. And so I think the way to solve this problem is the fundamental thing, the one thing that is going to address the essence of the problem would be to start moving industry off the planet. And it would have been crazy talk 20, 30 years ago. I mean, a lot of enthusiasts, people like me, have always been talking about this. But until recently, it was really difficult. It was impossible to convince the politicians and to convince a large fraction of the public that we actually can move industry off the planet. It's only been in recent years that the progress in spaceflight has made it possible to start convincing politicians and to start convincing a larger fraction of the public that we actually can do this. We actually have ways to move industry off the earth, and the end result will be having a civilization that supports economic development for all the third world countries so that they have the benefits of healthcare and education and equality for all the people. And these things like women's health and children's health are correlated to economic growth and correlated to the availability of cheap energy. And so if we want to rapidly produce better conditions for people all over the world, we do need to provide more development and more energy. But how do we do that at the same time that we're reducing the environmental burden from our planet? Well, the natural solution is to move the industry off the planet. And there are ways to do that now. So that's the context that I was saying, yeah, I get it with Starlink. I don't like it either. But I think there are pragmatic things that are in work that are going to, in the not too long distant future, put us in a better place than where we are today.
And one of the points that you made that often gets ignored is, if anyone out there is a reader of Arthur C. Clarke, he talked about this future where there is a series of geosynchronous satellites, not satellites, space stations actually, where people are crewing telescopes and research centers and communications, because one of the amazing things about his dream was he understood the importance of the geosynchronous orbit. That's why it's called the Clarke orbit. And he didn't grasp that we as humans would figure out how to remote control all the things from the surface of our world. So he had humans living on these stations, basically being the television station operators up in orbit. Now, in that future, his stations had power we can't quite put together right now. What would it take to go from being able to provide global internet from LEO, low Earth orbit, to instead providing it from this tremendously higher altitude geosynchronous position?
Yeah, so the problem with geosynchronous orbit is there is a significantly larger time delay at the speed of light. The radio signals, as we know, travel at the speed of light because they are electromagnetic radiation, just like light is. So to go up to geosynchronous and back down, typically right now, involves a time delay of a couple of seconds. But the majority of that time delay is not the speed of light. The majority of it is simply the architecture of our communication systems. Right now, when they want to channel the data through a satellite, they put the data together into a packet or a frame, and there's a buffering process to build the frame of data. And then they send it through the satellite, and it comes down the other side, and then they have to take it apart again and send the data to all its different places. And so the majority of the time delay is actually the architecture of the comm systems. If you take that out, I think the time delay, I forget the number, but it's 100 or a couple hundred milliseconds.
Yeah.
It's actually about the same as the time delay using fiber optics. So today, the vast majority of data goes through fiber optics. It doesn't go through geosynchronous orbit. Partly because we have made faster architectures that can send it through the fiber more quickly. You don't get the time delay. And also it's been really cheap to drape fibers all over the world. We've been having ships drive around the oceans, dropping cables across the Atlantic and the Pacific. And so we've wired up or fibered up a large fraction of the population of the Earth. But one of the problems is there are places where the fibers don't go yet, like the middle of some of the continents that are less developed. There are a lot of people all over Africa that don't have fiber optics, and the economics are not there to dig trenches all over Africa and put fibers in the ground. There's just not enough profit for the companies to do that. And so there is no internet service. There's very low internet service to people in vast regions of the Earth. Also, there are islands out in the middle of the oceans that don't get internet except through low bandwidth geosynchronous or other communication satellites right now. So so there's one of the things we could solve if we had internet in the sky that was broader bandwidth and more accessible for the world. But let me mention, up until now, the internet has been growing like crazy. It's not exactly exponential growth, but it's been on and off around exponential growth for several decades, many decades, since it was ARPANET, which was the original version of the internet. It's been growing exponentially, roughly. And there's no way that we can keep up with an exponential growth by dropping fibers all over the Earth for much longer. The problem is the internet has been doubling about once every year and a half. At that rate, pretty soon you can't double the fibers fast enough. You go to 2 fibers across the ocean, and then the next year you need 4, and then you need 8, and then you need 16, and pretty soon you don't have enough ships to load fiber. The only way we've been able to keep up so far is because we keep inventing new ways to shove more data through the existing fibers. The problem is we've now reached the limit of the fibers. We've just about reached that limit. The way you shove more data through the fibers is by making the light brighter so that you get a better signal to noise ratio. But when the light becomes so bright that it melts the glass, you've reached the limit. And we're just about there. So we've just about reached the point that you can't keep up with the growth of the internet anymore. And that's one of the motives to go to internet in the sky with satellites, with mega constellations.
Now, have you been to Australia?
I did, yeah. One time I went there. That was one of the times I saw the Milky Way. I went out to a beach. I forget where it was, somewhere in Queensland. I drove way north, Noosa, I think. anyways, I drove way north and I walked out to a beach where there were no lights. I literally couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And it was just staggering how beautiful the sky was.
I've got to go out to Siding Springs Observatory, and it was a very similar experience. And while it's an amazing place for astronomy, it is a terrible place for interneting. And the reason is that this island nation, this tiny continent in the middle of the seas, has like not that many fiber optics running through the ocean to it, where it is so remote on our planet. And because of this, you have terrible internet speeds. And it seriously affected my ability to get my job done. And these are things that we don't think about, because we think of Australia as this major Western world, this major Western nation that is currently completely on fire. Please be safe, Australia. And if a major nation can struggle, you start looking at places like Indonesia, Philippines, these island nations that are a scattering of so many different island cities. We can't just keep stringing fiber optic, because it's not even practical for an entire wealthy nation. How can it be affordable for a nation that isn't just one island, but a bazillion tiny islands? And
yeah. So in order for the whole world to have this level of connectivity, there comes a point where you have to stop relying on physical media to distribute it. You can't just keep putting more and more glass around the earth to channel all the signals. And that's where we start moving back towards using radio frequencies again. Now you can use laser comm. You can put satellites in the sky and use lasers to go up and down. And then you get tremendously good data rates. But one of the problems with lasers is the cloud coverage. When you have a cloudy day, then you lose internet. And so if you're relying on laser communications for, let's say, Northeast United States, Boston and that whole region in the Northeast, and then they have a winter storm where they get cloudy skies for the better part of a month, you just can't go without the internet for a month. But you can't give up that full data rate. So if we have to get away from fibers, laser comm just doesn't seem to be the right next solution. And that's why companies like OneWeb and SpaceX and Facebook and all the different big mega tech companies have been looking at radio frequency signals, mega constellations in low Earth and medium Earth orbit. And as you hinted at the start of this, there is a successor technology beyond those, and that would be to go back to geosynchronous, to the Clark orbit again.
Yeah.
Because eventually we're going to even fill up the data rates of low Earth orbit. These mega constellations won't be able to keep up. And the only way that you can provide data to meet the world's needs out to the end of the century will be to go back to geosynchronous orbit again.
And we have some questions coming in from the audience, but before I relay the questions, I just want to say we had something absolutely hilarious just occur in the donation stream. So everyone around Cosmic Quest knows I love a good palindrome, and reversible numbers in our donations goal just please me. And we had two different people simultaneously donate two different amounts that would have made the total a palindrome. But because they both donated at the same time, our total donation is not currently a palindrome and is going to require a donation of $150 at this point to get it back to being a palindrome. And we have a match going on. I'm just going to remind all of you, if we can bring in up to $1,000 during this hour, it will be matched with another donation of $1,000 from a single donor. So please, people, please. Okay, so I'm now going to relay the question that I saw come in. Nancy Graziano asks, and we just got another amount. Thank you, $10 from Skywatcher Jim. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow. We got another donation.
Wait, I missed. Oh, we got another donation of $10 from Miss Hook. Thank you so much. And we just got 1,000 bits from Refsmat. Now, the bits don't count towards palindromic goodness, but I will sync the bits at the end of the hour. All right. So they will count towards the match. All right, going back to what Nancy asked. Sorry, scrolling. So Nancy Graziano asks, Phil, the greatest expense when running fiber is not with new installations, but rather with having to dig existing copper runs to replace them with fiber. For new installations, the install cost, digging trenches and laying conduit are a wash. And Rudd also just tipped $10. And Alden tipped $100, and Cafuego donated $34.54. I love all of you. You're amazing. You're absolutely amazing. Thank you all so much. I love all of you. Yay. We have, I don't know if you can see the chat, Phil, but Twitch has allowed people to modify our standard emotes that we have to go with our channel. And our channel's emotes are a satellite, a Mars rover, and a rocket ship. And someone took the Mars rover and put Rudolph nose and antlers on it. Anyways, okay, so going back to the question. Scrolling back up. So I guess can you reflect on the fact that so much of the cost is just tied up in the fact that you have to move ground and replace the existing copper?
Yes, well, thank you, Nancy, for clarifying that. Yeah, so I'm arguing from a long-term perspective that if we want to take the internet, if we, let me put it this way, I would like to operate in a world of political realism. Yeah. If we could have everything the way we want it, the world would be a lot different, right? But it's not. And so what can we do within political realism to make the world better? And one of the things I don't think we're going to be able to do is change people fundamentally in the way they want economics, the way they want a better life. And so I think we're going to continue to see economic growth. We're going to continue to see more impact on our planet. And we're going to continue to see more growth in data systems. And that's not a bad thing. Hurting the planet is a bad thing, but I think more data and more computing is a good thing. So if we can find a way to have more data and more computing without hurting the planet, that would be ideal. And so projecting out to the end of the century, there comes a point where you just can't keep doubling the number of fibers. Digging the trenches is, as Nancy explained, a large part of the cost. If you start doubling and doubling and doubling, eventually building the ships that lay the fiber would become untenable. So at some point, I don't know where, but at some point in the century, you just can't keep going that way. And so there is this economic motive that's going to be forcing the world to do more constellations, more mega constellations. And although we don't like how it affects astronomy, I think political realism is we can't stop it. And to look at the bright side, there are going to be good things that come out of it in the long run. I'd also like to quickly point out that I think we haven't adequately looked at how to mitigate the problem yet. I think there are a lot of things we can do to prevent it or to minimize how it affects astronomy. I think that we can improve the way we integrate light across the arrays, the sensor arrays and telescopes, taking into account that we know where every satellite is, and that as we track them day by day, that model is going to approach perfection. And so we will be able to stop them from integrating light into our astronomical images. It will require some changes in telescopes to do that. It will require some changes in the networks of information that tell us the ephemerides of the satellites. But this, I think, is a solvable problem. So I think there are things we can do to improve it. But in the long term, I think that it's inevitable that civilization is going to push for these satellites.
I'm going to interrupt for a moment because joy and goodness. So first we had a flurry of small donations that kept making it a palindrome, which was awesome. Awesome. I love the fact that people were like, okay, I need to add this. I need to add this. I can do this. And they kept it a palindrome. But then Jeff Harris had to come in and go thwomp and drop $300, destroying the palindrome completely with awesomeness that we get matched. Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you so much for helping us out. You are making the science flow. Thank you. It takes money to do science.
It does.
And yeah, thank you. I'm just going to be joyful in your direction, Phil. And Nancy just put it, sometimes the palindrome takes one for the team. Sometimes the palindrome does take one for the team. So one of the goals is to move the industry off the world. And this starts to get to a future where you have to be careful of human beings still have thumbs. We are the best repair bots in our solar system still. And we always have to worry about finding that science fiction future where we move the industry and those who are a new spacefaring working class off the Earth and leaving our park-like planet, or what we hope will return to being a park-like planet, for those who find ways to earn a living without having to work in the factories. How do we avoid that and avoid overpopulating our planet in this future?
Yeah, those are great questions. And a lot of times I will beg off that it's going to take a lot of people who are smart in a lot of areas where I'm not smart to work on these problems. So I can't offer answers to all these things. I can give you a few gleams that I've picked up over the years. According to sociologists, they claim that as we become more wealthy, the population is naturally tending to level off. And so there are predictions that it should level off by the end of the century at about 12 billion people, 11 or 12. The most recent predictions say that the birth rate hasn't slowed down as much as they thought. But I want to point out that the underlying assumption in that is that the whole world will become developed. If it takes development to get people to have a controlled birth rate, then it's actually necessary for us to give everybody a developed economy for that to happen.
Right.
So development is actually going to work for the good of the world if we can give everybody a healthy lifestyle, right? So that's one gleaning I picked up.
Bad Panda Bear just donated and was off by 1 cent on making it a palindrome. I'm sorry, that just...
He did that on purpose. He did that on purpose. Don't feel bad for him.
And he's laughing. Everyone in the chat is laughing. I'm sorry, we're trying to have this super serious conversation about space exploration. All right, we just got another donation for $5. You guys are fabulous, and Broken Symmetry is like triggered because the symmetry is wrong. If we can't laugh, what's the point of going on?
That's right. That's why we do everything, right? We're not doing physics just because we love physics. We're doing physics because we love humanity and we love civilization. And we love that people can laugh and that we can share things over the internet. Right? That's why we do it.
So since the serious conversation is going to keep getting distracted by the palindromes in the chat, I'm going to take us into a new direction. Okay. What are some of the things that have you most excited that seem to be near future discoveries that we will see soon in our making space not just a frontier, but making it part of the economy?
Well, so I have to sign a lot of non-disclosure agreements in my job.
I understand. There's lots of things you're super excited about you're not allowed to tell anyone about. And that, I get it. It sucks, but I get it.
The thing, I can just tell you that there's a lot of optimism in the world about space right now. There's a lot of hope that we have turned a corner. Launch costs have come down and robotics have gotten better. And those two things together mean that we can start putting robotic systems in space affordably to start doing things we could never do before. And then it comes down to the business model. What are those robots going to do? And the business model is the part I can't talk about. I've been working for 20 years trying to keep a list of how do you make money in space. When I say make money, I mean how do you make the cost of doing stuff in space produce a net benefit? And I've got this list. I've tried to keep a comprehensive list. Throughout at first I used to think there's only 8 things you can do in space to make money. You know, you can do telecom, you can do knickknacks like lunar rocks, do tourism, and there's only 8. And through the years, people keep going, you forgot this one, you forgot that one. And so now my list is like 48 things. The craziest one on there is retirement homes on the moon. Because there was this one guy who was absolutely insisting, no, that is going to be a thing because elderly people don't want to fall down and break their hip, so they need low gravity. I just can't imagine having that conversation with my mom. Like, Mom, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to put you on the moon. So but because he insisted, I added it to the list. You know, so there's a lot of crazy stuff on there. Some of those things on the list are starting to become real. There are companies that have serious plans to do things off Earth that are exciting. One of the game changers is the potential of this Starship that SpaceX is building. SpaceX wants to launch, I think Elon said it would be a couple hundred tons at a time. I don't remember the number he said publicly. But that size rocket allows you to put so much stuff in space at a time that we're no longer talking about bootstrapping factories on the moon. We're now talking about delivering factories to the moon. And that changes the game. Blue Origin has the Blue Moon lander, which is going to, it's going to be, I think, like a 40-ton lander, 10 tons of payload at a time, and then a stretch version. That's a game changer. The ability to land, just to put that in perspective, the lunar module, I'm going to stop talking in a minute because I see you laughing. The lunar module, when it landed, the whole thing, including the fuel to launch back off the moon, was 5 tons. So the Blue Moon lander is going to land 10 tons. That means it could land 2 entire lunar modules as the payload. So this is a revolutionary game-changing capability that we're going to have delivering stuff to the moon really soon. Okay, so
sorry. The reason I'm laughing is Keeper of Maps keeps putting snowman unicorns, snowman with the carrot coming out their forehead, in the chat and donating 1 cent at a time. He's donated other money. We're not worried. It's just the unicorns. The unicorns in the chat that are actually snowmen. I can't not laugh at that. You've probably never given this weird of a serious discussion before.
Awesome.
So what all is on your list of ways in addition? So we have retirement communities, we have materials, we have telecommunication, commercials being filmed in space, Bigelow shining their lights on the insides of their capsules. What are other ways on the list of ways to make money in space?
Yeah, I can't remember the whole list off the top of my head, but I'll try to remember a few. So of course we all know about tourism, and I think there is a business case for tourism in space. I think that we will see tourists, or let's call them adventure tourism, or we could call it private astronauts. I think we're going to see private astronauts actually visiting the moon before very long. And I think we're going to see modules on the moon where people are going to be staying, so you could buy a ticket and go stay on the moon, and you could do your own science, or you could write art, or create fantastic music inspired by the view of the Earth coming up over the horizon on the moon. Another thing would be making rocket fuel. That's one of the main ideas that is most credible for the near term. There is a business case to make rocket fuel on the moon. The numbers work. I've run the numbers myself. I know other people who've done the calculations. But the issue right now is investor risk, trying to de-risk the whole prospect of mining water and making rocket fuel. And then what you do with the rocket fuel is you boost communication satellites. And then the satellites get to orbit cheaper, and so they deliver data services. So the consumers will actually be the people of Earth benefiting from mining on the moon. Okay, that business case actually works if you can de-risk it enough to get the investment to get started. There are technology advancements that are happening right now that are de-risking it. And some of them are widely known, and there's some other ideas that are brand new ideas that haven't been stated in public yet. So I really think that's going to happen. I really think we're going to have rocket fuel made in space using asteroids and lunar water. By the way,
I guess I was.
There's a negative aura around mining in a lot of people's eye.
Even in space?
A lot of people, I hear this all the time. People say, well, we've already ruined the Earth and now you want to go ruin space too. And so let me mention that, first of all, the mining we're talking about, in order to start industry on the moon, that entire mining could fit within the size of a football field. And then you could create this industry that could then go onto the main asteroid belt. You know, so, and also when you make rubble in space, the solar wind just blows it away. You know, the Earth receives like 40,000 tons of space dust and debris every year falling from the sky. And the amount of dust that we might create doing this mining is trivial by comparison.
And in my head, I have this in a terrible Russian accent, this voice going, if you know destroy asteroid, asteroid destroy you. I've been awake a lot.
What I want to say is that the majority of the data that we have of the subsurface of the Earth comes from economic geology, from mining and from drilling. And if we didn't have that economic motive to pay for all the drilling and all the digging, we would know very little, relatively speaking, we would have much less progress in the geosciences than we have actually had. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 95% of Earth scientists are employed in economic geology. 5% are academic. Those 5% are supported largely by student tuition. 95% of whom are doing economic geology. So the vast majority of support for sciences comes from economic activity. That's what we're missing off the planet. If we had economic geology at the asteroids and the moon, we would have 20 times higher data, 20 times higher support for the sciences, or greater than 20% or 20 times higher immediately or pretty quickly. So we would have vastly more data. We would have vastly more support for scientists like you and me, and it would the science alone would revolutionize our understanding of space. So there's a side benefit of doing economics.
I'm going to interrupt you again because I love our chat. Fenmill
I'm fixing this.
is donating a Fibonacci series of bits. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. So some people have a favorite color. Some people have... There's many things people have favorites of. I have a favorite extremophile, the trilobite. I have a favorite math series, the Fibonacci series. And these people know this. And they're doing this in such a subtle way. It is delightful. And for those who don't know what the heck is going on in chat, it is a Fibonacci sequence of unicorn snowmen is appearing in chat. And it took me far too long to figure out what was going on. I'm sorry. What is the silliest thing you have come across in all of your research? For instance, I know that they tried having frogs on the International Space Station, as I consider that to be the silliest biology video ever taken on the ISS, was a frog coping with zero gravity. What is the funniest thing you've run across so far?
Oh my goodness, I don't know. Let me just think about that for a couple of seconds. I don't know. I can't think of anything really silly. I've had a lot of funny experiences. Like I've done a lot of reduced gravity flight tests, and let me think if I can come up with one of the stories. Now that you put me on the spot, I can't think of it.
And I'm switching headphones just because my Bluetooth is becoming sad.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I can't think of anything really funny right now. I used to be afraid to fly on the reduced gravity airplane.
Why?
I was always terrified. And I wasn't terrified because of fear of crashing. It's this commercial airliner where they took all the seats out, and then they're flying in this parabola. And when you're coming out of the parabola, you're pulling 2 Gs. And I used to look out the window, and the wings would be bending up from all the force on the airplane, trying to pull out. You're diving towards the ocean, and you're trying to pull out of this dive. But the thing that terrified me the most was I might have to go to the bathroom while I'm on the plane, because there was no bathroom. They took the bathroom out in order to save weight on the plane. And so they had a 5-gallon bucket, and they would hold a blanket up around you and go to the bathroom. And they would have to stop doing parabolas because you can't, use a 5-gallon bucket in 0G. And so I was terrified that I would have to go to the bathroom, and everybody would be sitting there waiting for me to come out from behind the blanket, and then they'd all be looking. And so like the morning I had to fly, I would not eat breakfast because it's like, I just don't want to go to the bathroom on the plane.
I need to adjust the volume on this real fast. You can keep talking. I just need to step sideways. Oh, I have to switch back to my Bluetooth. I'm sorry. For whatever reason, your volume has decreased as this hour has progressed. Hold on. Please continue with the Fibonacci sequence, chat. I am delighted. So I can hear you, Phil. I'm just increasing the volume so everyone can hear you well.
So while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and tell another story, a really stupid story. There was a time in my work for NASA that I almost laughed to death. I don't think I really could have laughed to death, but I thought at the time that I was going to laugh to death. We were on that volcano in Hawaii, and one of the interns got the idea to go to the top of the mountain to watch the sunset out over the Pacific. So we said, yeah, great idea, let's do it. And we were wearing NASA coveralls that were long sleeved, but we weren't wearing jackets. And we hopped in his car, and he drove us to the top of the mountain. And I was terrified on the way up because he was all over the road and there was no guardrail, and he was swerving to the edge, and there was like drops to your death over the edge. And I couldn't get him to drive any safer. So finally I just said, I'm not going to look out the window. I'm just going to look at my feet until we get there, and we're either going to die or we're going to make it. We finally got to the top of the mountain. And when we got out of the car, it was freezing because we're at 14,000 plus feet above sea level. And there were tourists up there that had fur-lined parkas. And we're like, oh, this is so stupid. We didn't bring jackets. And I thought, jogging to warm up. And he said, yeah, great idea.
Oh, no.
So we went jogging. And,
oh, God.
And that lasted for about 30 steps until we couldn't breathe anymore in the high altitude. And so we're hyperventilating.
Yeah.
And then you just can't catch up. You know, you just can't catch your breath. And so we're breathing this cold air in and out, in and out, in and out. And so we're getting colder and colder. And between gasping for air, we're like, that was stupid. Yeah, that was stupid. Oh, and so we're hyperventilating and we're getting dizzier and dizzier. And suddenly everything was funny. And we started laughing. Oh, that was so stupid. And we're laughing so hard. And then we're really behind on our oxygen budget, you know, because we're laughing so hard. And so we fell to our hands and knees and we're facing each other, hands and knees on the ground, looking face to face. I could not stop laughing. Everything was so funny. And then we're like, we're going to die from laughing because we can't breathe. And it's so funny that we're going to die. And that made it even funnier. And we laughed for about 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh, no.
And finally, we were so dizzy, we were about to pass out. And then it finally stopped being funny.
Yeah, yeah.
We stopped laughing. We just laid there on the ground trying to catch our breath. And then we stopped and said, okay, well, that happened. So then we watched the sun go down, and we drove back to our camp, back down to 8,000 feet.
So one of the medical professionals in our community just made the comment, and that, folks, is hypoxia in a nutshell, with someone followed up with literally laughing to death.
Yes, yes. So I have, believe it or not, I did take the NASA high altitude training where they put you in a vacuum chamber and they take the air out of the room, and then you have to take your mask off and you take notes. You have to answer a quiz like, who is the first president? How many states are there? You know, all these easy questions. And you're taking the test and you're noticing yourself go into hypoxia, and you have to notice your first 2 symptoms. And for me, the first symptom was I got tunnel vision, and the second symptom was my hands felt fumbly, and I'm trying to write with fumbly.
Oh, no.
And after you get your first 2 symptoms, you're supposed to put the mask back on and flip these 2 switches to blow the air, to turn the air on, and then to turn it to high power. So it's blowing oxygen into your face so you recover, and you recover pretty quickly. There was one person walking around with a helmet, and they were talking through the intercom. And they told us, if you wait too late, you will lose useful consciousness, and you will just sit there with this big grin on your face like this. And so one of the guys in our group went past that limit, and he was sitting there with that big grin on his face. And so the worker went in front, and he was sitting right next to me. And the worker goes in front of him and is yelling over the microphone, "Put your mask on now! Put your mask on now!" And so our friend was just sitting there grinning at him. And so they finally had to put the mask on his face and flip the switches and wait till he came back. So he came back. He was fine. So I'd been through that training, and I should have known better. But yeah, it happened.
Yeah, and thank you, Fenmil. Thank you. Oh man, my scroll can't even keep up anymore. So thank you, Tom Van Scooter. Thank you, Fenmil. Thank you, T-Driven Dev. Thank you, JMCT. You guys and holy expletive, Batman. Bad Panda just donated $500. We have made our match, people.
All right. Everybody.
Thank you. And I still owe Bad Panda Bear a hand-knitted bright blue octopus. I'm really going to finish it. I have a plane trip to the American Astronomical Society meeting in Hawaii, and you know what octopus I'm going to be knitting? Your octopus, Bad Panda Bear. Your octopus is getting knit on that airplane. Thank you. And Rich061 just donated $5. This is amazing. This is amazing, awesome. Folks. Thank you. Thank you. And all of this talk of high altitude insanity reminds me of the story of they're still keeping up with the Fibonacci sequence. Reminds me of the story of, I think it was the building of Keck, where one of the people who was working on it was asked, "So how are things going?" and responded, "They're going fine, but no matter how many times I cut this piece, it's still too short." And I suspect that is an apocryphal story, but Annie and our intro just gave the confused dog look. But these are the things that happens at high altitude. You just lose bits of your brain. And this is where, in trying to figure out what pressure to put things at, you have to figure out how to balance the fact that you can exist at a lower pressure with a higher oxygen content. But if you have too high of an oxygen content, things burn. And so you lower the pressure, lower the oxygen content until you find this medium where you're still functional. And most aircraft, I believe it's around 8,000 feet equivalent is what they have the airplane at. Please correct me if I'm remembering this wrong. And the International Space Station isn't kept at sea level, from what I understand, because it's just too hard. But they had to find a balance between fire and brain cells going no. Just no. So other than trying to laugh yourself to death, have you had any adventures in planetary science? And I am horrified at the 5-gallon bucket story. One of our team members is actually slowly becoming an expert in space toilets. It's delightful and awesome. When we realized how many, I don't know if you know this, so the Soyuz, when it goes up, it has the capsule at the top, the skirted storage region beneath, and there's a space toilet in that skirted storage area beneath. And those just get sent back down through the atmosphere and burned up. So we are systematically destroying these super expensive space toilets on a regular cadence. Thank you so much, DPI, for restoring palindromic nature to the goal. So Annie, do you know the running tally on how many toilets have been destroyed?
It's at least 140.
So it's at least 140 toilets have been destroyed.
Interesting. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to think that if they're burning up on reentry, that means we are breathing those toilets.
Yes. And yes, let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. So I can share another funny story about reduced gravity flights, and those were planetary science adventures, because
Uh-huh.
my experiments were studying how to land rockets on the moon. We were blowing gas onto simulated lunar soil, and we were doing 1/6 gravity parabolas to simulate the conditions on the moon. And so we were studying how rocket exhaust blow soil for lunar landings. During one of those flights, they told us that if we had a loss of cabin pressure, we would have to run over to the sidewall, and they had some oxygen candles, and then you would put your mask on and light the candle, and it would produce the oxygen. It's weird.
Wait, what's an oxygen candle?
That's the way it works in commercial airliners. When you pull the mask down and pull it straight, it actually lights a candle, which, of course, it has to burn some oxygen to burn, but it actually produces more oxygen. So it's a net producer of oxygen. I don't know.
I'd like to state that fire seems like a bad idea, but go on.
That's what they call it. I don't know the details, but they are called oxygen candles.
Okay.
And so anyways, they told us, run over and get the oxygen candle and put the mask on. And they said, we will tell you that there's a cabin leak by blowing this horn. And they had a boat horn that they would, the guy sitting on his headset, the pilots would tell him, blow the horn, and he would. So we were the guinea pigs. We were the first crew to fly on this aircraft. And the very first parabola, we go over the top and we hear that sound. And we're all like, oh no, first parabola, we lose cabin pressure. And all the experimenters stop, and we look at the safety officer, and he's sitting there with his legs crossed, and he's sitting like this, and he's not blowing the horn. But we hear the horn, and everybody's looking at each other. This is surreal. You know what? And so we all just casually eventually go back to doing our experiments. And then every parabola, we hear the horn, even though he's not blowing it. And so after the flight's over, we asked, like, what the heck was that?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, that wasn't the horn. That was the seal on the cargo hatch of the plane. The seal
shit.
moves, and it vibrates and makes the same sound as the warning horn. And so we said, okay. And he said, just ignore the sound. And so he said, so how do we know if it's the real oxygen warning? And their answer was, oh, yeah, we didn't think about that. So that was the fun thing about being the guinea pig group. But we had a whole bunch of problems like that on the guinea pig flight, and they worked out all their bugs. And I flew with them several more times, and it was a much better experience after that.
Well,
Yeah.
then.
So,
Well, then.
We had fun. Plug there for anybody who's thinking about going into the sciences, that the sciences can be hard. Getting funding is hard, but it's been an amazing experience. You pretty much get to do whatever you can convince people to pay you to do. If you want to go on volcanoes, then write a proposal and get funding, and you can go on volcano.
Yeah.
You can do reduced gravity flights. You get to go to conferences. You can go to Australia, go to Europe. You can pretty much write your own ticket as long as you can convince somebody to give you the funding or fund yourself.
You have to be one hell of a good writer, communicator, and not whatever the heck the opposite of philanthropist is, beggar, in order to be successful.
Yep. Yeah. But granted that it's tough,
Yeah.
it is an amazing experience to do what you want to do to make the world better, to extend the knowledge of humanity, and to have these adventures while you're doing it. So the sciences are amazing. If there's any young people out there listening to this, I would say if you are ready for a great experience to change the world, then go for it. Go into the STEM fields.
Yeah. And it's now 9:03. We have met our goal. We are 15 cents away from something, 14 cents away from being at 6,900, but we are at the palindrome of 689986. Remember, if we hit 10,000 tonight, new goals unlock. People, we are within sight of those goals. And yes, one girl, two beakers, we are nerds. We are nerds, and this is okay. Phil, this has been an insane hour.
It's been a lot of fun.
And it's been great having you on. And I'm so glad that we are both in so much better of a place now than we were this time last year.
Awesome.
It takes a lot of fight to keep going.
One more thing, Pamela. I want to say that I've got another connection to you because when my daughter was in high school, she did a science summer in Colorado, and you spoke at that. Do you remember?
I do.
My daughter remembers you from then. She's now studying physics and math, and so she's still in the STEM field. So thank you for having an input into her life.
It was a fabulous experience. I went from that event to a star party up in the mountains where I learned a passion for hammock tents, because when it's pouring rain, you're not being rained on, and the rain is several feet below you, so you don't feel it running under your tent. That was a really awesome trip for me, first meeting all of the kids and then getting to go see the amazing Colorado skies. So yeah, it's been a great evening, and have a wonderful holidays. Merry Christmas, and I can't wait for our paths to cross again.
All right. It's been great. Loved it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.